You are thrust into the dim, suffocating confines of the Ottoman harem, the air thick with the mingled scents of unwashed bodies, cheap incense failing to mask the putrid undercurrent of sweat and excrement, your wrists bound in rough ropes that chafe your skin raw as eunuchs. Mutilated men with hollow eyes and scarred groins drag you across cold marble floors slick with the residue of countless tears and spilled bodily fluids. The clamor of weeping girls echoing around you, their voices cracking in. Terror as they are stripped bare, prodded like livestock, their virgin flesh inspected for blemishes or signs of disease, the sharp metallic tang of blood from hasty circumcisions or forced examinations filling your nostrils. While the distant moans of women in labor or agony from untreated infections remind you that this is no palace of pleasure, but a prison of perpetual violation, where your body will be broken, your spirit crushed, and your womb turned into a tool for dynastic desperation, all under the gaze of a sultan whose whims could drown you in the Bosphorus for a mere suspicion of infidelity. The water closing over your head in a choking embrace as fish nibble at your bloating corpse. In the shadowed annals of the Ottoman Empire, where the grandeur of Topkapi Palace concealed a labyrinth of cruelty and control, the imperial harem stood as the epicenter of hidden horrors, a seraglio teeming with enslaved women whose lives were defined by sexual servitude, political machinations, and anatomical monstrosities that twisted both body and mind. Their screams muffled by thick walls adorned with intricate tiles that seemed to mock their pain with indifferent beauty. These concubines, far from the romanticized odalisques of Orientalist fantasy, were victims of a system that commodified their flesh, subjecting them to medical abnormalities, royal dysfunctions, and hygiene disasters that festered behind gilded walls, influencing the empire's fate in ways censored from mainstream chronicles. Where the opulent facades hid chambers stained with the remnants of desperate abortions and infected wounds. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. What emerges from the depths of historical records is a tapestry of taboo realities. Personal hygiene catastrophes amid overcrowded quarters reeking of decay, royal intimate failures that precipitated political upheavals, medical grotesqueries from rampant venereal diseases to botched births, the concealed anguish of women behind veils of opulence, and graphic details expunged from sanitized accounts, revealing how these enslaved figures shaped an empire through their suffering and subtle power. Their whispered intrigues echoing like ghosts in the corridors. The revelations begin with the brutal procurement of these women, often mere girls as young as 7, snatched from Circassian villages or Georgian homes, their families impoverished or coerced into selling them into slavery, where they were transported in fetid caravans, chained and starved, arriving at the palace gates with bodies marred by bruises and infections from the journey's violations, their skin crawling with lice that burrowed into scalps, causing itchy, weeping sores that bled when scratched. Once inside, the Asami, the novices, endured a regimen of transformation that stripped away their identities, forced conversions to Islam, new names erasing their pasts, and a novitiate of Asamilic that included anatomical inspections so invasive that many bled for days, their hymens probed by elderly midwives whose fingers carried the grime of previous examinations, fostering outbreaks of festering sores and putrid discharges that went untreated in the humid, unsanitary dormitories where dozens slept on straw mats infested with lice and vermin, the nocturnal rustling of rats adding to the symphony of coughs and whimpers. Historical accounts describe these spaces as heartrending wastes of human life, where the air hung heavy with the stench of unwashed linens and bodily effluence, the women's menstrual rags piled in corners breeding flies and disease, while the constant threat of dysentery from contaminated water sources left many writhing in abdominal agony, their bowels expelling bloody mucus in shared latrines that overflowed with excrement, the slimy overflow seeping into sleeping areas and breeding maggots that wriggled across bare feet. Yet this was only the prelude. The truly shocking lay in the escalation to sexual servitude, where the most beautiful were trained in erotic arts, their bodies manipulated through exercises that stretched and contorted intimate muscles, often leading to chronic pelvic pains and urinary incontinence, conditions dismissed as the price of pleasing the Sultan, with women leaking uncontrollably during dances meant to seduce, their shame hidden beneath layers of perfumed silks that soon soured with the acrid smell of urine. Escalating further into the abyss of taboo, the harem's medical abnormalities manifested in epidemics of venereal diseases that ravaged the concubines' anatomies, syphilis and gonorrhea spreading like wildfire through the Sultan's indiscriminate couplings, resulting in grotesque symptoms, festering chancres on genitals that ooze pus with a foul, metallic odor, blinding eye infections from untreated gonorrheal conjunctivitis passed to newborns during birth, the infant's tiny lids swollen shut with sticky discharge that hardened into crusts, and neurological deteriorations where women once graceful devolved into trembling wrecks, their minds eroded by tertiary syphilis into madness that mirrored the Sultan's own psychological breakdowns, babbling incoherently as tremors shook their limbs like leaves in a storm. Contemporary records reveal how the one-woman, one-son policy, designed to prevent fraternal rivalries, forced concubines into desperate measures. Herbal abortifacients ingested in secret that induced hemorrhagic miscarriages, leaving wombs scarred and infertile, or crude surgical interventions by harem physicians using unsterilized instruments that introduced tetanus, causing lockjaw and agonizing spasms until death claimed them in contorted poses, their jaws clenched so tightly that teeth shattered under the pressure. The royal dysfunction extended to the sultans themselves. Take Ibrahim I, whose paranoia and impotence, perhaps from mercury treatments for his own venereal afflictions, led to the infamous drowning of 280 concubines in the Bosphorus, their bodies weighted with sacks and tossed into the waves, bloating and rotting as they washed ashore. A graphic testament to the intimate failures that precipitated mass murder and destabilized the court. The bloated cadavers pecked by seabirds until eye sockets gaped empty and flesh sloughed off in putrid strips. These women, their public facades of silk and jewels hiding scabbed skin from self-inflicted scratches to ward off the Sultan's touch, suffered hidden torments that influenced imperial decisions, as infected favorites whispered poisoned counsel amid fevered delusions, their breath hot and fetid with the rot of decaying teeth. Delving deeper into the morbid intricacies, the harem's hygiene disasters compounded these medical horrors, with overcrowded quarters, housing up to 720 women at peaks, turning into breeding grounds for pestilence, the air thick with the sharp, acrid smell of urine-soaked floors where chamber pots overflowed unchecked, and the pervasive rot of gangrenous wounds from poorly healed episiotomies during childbirth, where midwives' knives sliced perineums without anesthesia, leaving flaps of torn flesh that suppurated in the heat, attracting swarms of flies that laid eggs in the open wounds, hatching into wriggling larvae that feasted on necrotic tissue. Diplomatic correspondence from European envoys, veiled in euphemism, hints at the olfactory assault, a miasma of decaying food scraps mingled with the coppery tang of postpartum hemorrhage, where women bled out on bloodstained mats, their cries drowned by the cacophony of rival factions plotting assassinations with poisoned sherbets that induced violent vomiting and diarrhea, staining the marble with bile and feces, the viscous pools congealing underfoot in slippery hazards. The supporting characters, court physicians reluctant to intervene for fear of execution, and eunuchs whose own castrated anatomies leaked perpetual discharge from botched surgeries, witnessed these scenes with grim resignation, their accounts preserved in fragmented memoirs, who noted the Defterei Heisen, registers of sex workers, including harem outcasts, their bodies marked by scars from whippings for perceived disloyalty, fostering a culture of paranoia where even the Valide Sultan's chambers reeked of laudanum overdoses used to numb the pain of chronic fistulas from repeated forcible entries. The opium haze clouding minds as leaks of fecal matter soiled bedding with a nauseating brown sludge. The narrative escalates to the royal dysfunctions that intertwined with these private agonies, where sultans like Murad IV, plagued by gout and alcoholism, inflicted their intimate failures upon the concubines, their swollen, pus-weeping members transmitting infections that caused uterine abscesses, women convulsing in fever as pus accumulated in their abdomens, distending bellies like grotesque pregnancies until rupture brought septic shock and death in pools of foul-smelling fluid that bubbled with gas from bacterial fermentation. Hidden suffering lurked behind every facade. The Valide Sultan, ostensibly powerful, often concealed her own medical abnormalities, such as Kozum Sultan's rumored endometriosis, causing excruciating cramps that left her bedridden, her linens soaked in clotted blood that resembled dark, congealed jelly, while orchestrating the elimination of rivals through smotherings that left blue-lipped corpses discreetly disposed in the palace gardens, the earth absorbing the stench of decomposition as worms emerged from nostrils and mouths. Graphic details censored from official histories emerge in primary sources. Autopsy reports on drowned concubines revealing waterlogged lungs and stomachs filled with salt water ingested in final gasps, or the preserved evidence of mummified fetuses from failed abortions, their tiny limbs twisted in formaldehyde jars kept as macabre reminders in the Sultan's private collections, the shriveled skins cracking like parchment under the weight of forgotten sins, underscoring how personal hygiene, lapses, unwashed hands transferring fecal matter during examinations, propagated cholera outbreaks that decimated the harem, bodies piled in courtyards awaiting hasty burials, limbs entangled in rigor mortis embraces. Systematically unveiling more shocking layers, the concubines' roles extended beyond mere reproduction into realms of psychological deterioration, with a constant surveillance by eunuchs, whose own mutilations, often performed crudely with hot irons searing flesh to cauterize wounds, left them in chronic pain and prone to urinary tract infections that emitted a constant ammoniac odor sharp enough to sting the eyes, fostered an atmosphere of dread, women developing hysterical paralyses or self-mutilations to avoid the Sultan's bed, carving patterns into their arms with stolen pins until scars formed keloid barriers of raised, itchy tissue that throbbed like living reminders of despair. Medical terminology from the era, like Venetian ceruse, poisons used in cosmetics that leached lead into skin, causing pallid complexions masking underlying anemias from blood loss during violent deflowerings, where young girls' vaginas tore under the weight of adult men, requiring stitches that often infected, leading to vesicovaginal fistulas where urine leaked uncontrollably, soaking garments in a perpetual humiliation that left trails of dampness on cushions like accusatory stains. Contemporary observer accounts detail how concubinage involved compulsory non-consensual sex, equated to rape, with women bought, sold, or gifted, their bodies commodified in slave markets, where inspections included digital penetrations to assess tightness, leaving many with prolapsed organs from repeated traumas, their uteruses descending like grotesque protrusions that physicians attempted to reposition with pessaries fashioned from pomegranate peels, often rotting inside and causing septicemia, the decay releasing gases that bloated abdomens with a foul, fermenting reek. The escalation continues with the political and social consequences of these personal failures, where Sultan's impotence, rumored in cases like Suleiman I's later years, exacerbated by diabetes that caused erectile dysfunction and gangrenous toes, emitting a sweet-rotten smell like overripe fruit mingled with death, led to frantic efforts to produce heirs. Concubines subjected to fertility rituals involving hot pokers applied to abdomens to stimulate ovaries, resulting in burns that blistered and peeled, revealing raw flesh prone to fly infestations where maggots burrowed deep into muscle, emerging as flies in buzzing swarms. Collateral damage extended to spouses and children. Favorites like Hurrem Sultan, while wielding influence, endured the psychological toll of watching rivals' offspring strangled with silk cords to eliminate threats, the gurgling sounds haunting the chambers like choked echoes, while their own children suffered from inbreeding-related deformities, such as hydrocephalus with enlarged heads filled with fluid, pressing on brains until idiocy set in, the skulls soft and pulsating under thin skin, like overfilled balloons. Attempts at concealment involved elaborate deceptions. Makeup caked over syphilitic rashes that cratered faces like lunar landscapes pitted with craters of pus, or opium-laced wines to dull senses during couplings that left bruises blooming like dark flowers on thighs. But these facades crumbled under scrutiny, precipitating scandals that weakened the empire as whispered rumors of the Sultan's softness emboldened viziers to plot coups, their ambitions fueled by harem leaks from bribed servants who witnessed the graphic failures firsthand, the air thick with the scent of betrayal and decaying loyalty. As conditions worsened over time, the deterioration intensified, with concubines' problems compounding into chronic afflictions, repeated pregnancies stretching abdominal walls until diastasis recti left muscles separated, organs herniating through gaps in excruciating protrusions that bulged like alien growths under skin, or postpartum hemorrhages where blood gushed in torrents, soaking birthing stools in crimson pools that attracted rats scurrying from the shadows to lap at the warm liquid. Desperate measures escalated to extreme solutions. Herbal concoctions of pennyroyal and savon-induced abortions, but often cause renal failure. Women urinating blood as kidneys shut down, their skin jaundicing to a sickly yellow while convulsions rack their frames like electric shocks, foam-flecking lips in rabid displays. Paranoia and isolation gripped the inhabitants, the veiled Sultan barricading herself amid suspicions of poisoning, her food tasters collapsing in frothing fits from arsenic-laced meals, their bodies arching in tetanic spasms before going limp in puddles of vomit, while concubines turned to self-isolation in dank cells, their minds fracturing into dissociative states, where they mumbled incoherently about lost homelands, scratching at walls until fingernails splintered and bled, leaving bloody streaks like desperate messages. The final collapse came in waves of epidemics, like the cholera that swept through in the 19th century, bodies convulsing in rice-water diarrhea that flooded corridors with watery excrement, the stench so overpowering that even the Sultan fled, leaving the women to die in their own filth, their emaciated forms piled like cordwood from mass graves, skin sloughing off in sheets from dehydration. In the throes of death and revelation, the final moments of these women unfolded in harrowing scenes, such as the execution of Kozum Sultan, strangled in her bed by eunuchs whose hands bore the calluses of prior murders, her throat crushing under pressure until blood vessels burst in her eyes, leaving them red-rimmed in eternal accusation, her tongue protruding swollen and purple as life ebbed away in gasps. Autopsy-like examinations post-mortem, though forbidden by Islamic law, were clandestinely performed by curious physicians, revealing uteruses riddled with fibroids like knotted ropes twisted in agony, or ovaries cystic from untreated infections that had swollen to the size of grapefruits, bursting with pus upon incision in a spray of yellow-green fluid that splashed across aprons. The aftermath brought shocking disclosures, preserved letters from concubines smuggled out, detailing the horrors of forced sodomy to avoid pregnancy, resulting in anal fissures that bled perpetually, tearing wider with each assault like ragged wounds that never healed, or the sanitary napkins fashioned from rags teeming with bacteria, causing toxic shock syndromes where fever spiked to delirium. Women hallucinating spectral lovers amid their agony, their skin burning hot to the touch as organs failed in cascading shutdowns. Historical cover-ups sanitized these truths, with official chronicles omitting the graphic details, but preserved evidence, such as the skeletal remains unearthed in palace grounds, showing pelvic deformities from rickets induced by vitamin D deficiency in sunless confines, bears witness to the concealed realities, the bones etched with lines of arrested growth from malnutrition. Femurs bowed under the weight of unhealed fractures from beatings disguised as discipline, joints fused and arthritic, knots from damp cold. Returning to that initial thrust into the harem's abyss, now armed with the weight of these revelations, one sees the scene transformed. Not merely a gateway to suffering, but a microcosm of an empire's rot, where the hidden truths of powerful figures' private failures, sultans undermined by their own dysfunctions, concubines as both victims and veiled influencers, underscore broader themes of power's fragility and humanity's capacity for cruelty, the gilded halls echoing with the ghosts of silent screams. The universal lessons echo through time. How unchecked authority breeds monstrosities, anatomical and moral, and how hidden sufferings, like those of the Ottoman concubines, ripple into historical tides, shaping destinies far beyond gilded cages, their blood staining the foundations of legacy. In contemporary parallels, we glimpse similar dynamics in modern autocracies, where private abuses fuel public tyrannies, reminding us that the past's horrors persist in subtler forms, veiled but ever present. Yet the final haunting image lingers, a lone concubine, her body ravaged by disease, gazing at the Bosphorus where sisters drowned, her reflection in the water a distorted mask of what was once beauty, now a festering emblem of tragedy, whispering eternal warnings across the ages, her frail hand reaching out as if to pull the viewer into the depths of forgotten pain.